Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a great afternoon. We begin today with some developing news on the Deshaun Watson suspension front. The National Football League had until 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning to file an appeal. Didn't take them quite that long. Tom Pelissero tweets out, the NFL is in fact appealing Deshaun Watson's 6-game suspension. Pelissero says, buckle up. Here's the statement that was released by the NFL on Monday. Judge Sue L. Robinson, the independent disciplinary jointly appointed by the NFL and NFL Players Association, issued her ruling in the personal conduct policy matter regarding Deshaun Watson. As is part of the NFLPA's collective bargaining agreement, the factual findings of the disciplinary officer are binding and may not be appealed. Judge Robinson found that Mr. Watson violated the NFL's personal conduct policy on multiple occasions and suspended him for 6 games. CBA affords the NFL or the NFLPA the right to appeal the discipline imposed by the disciplinary officer. Such an appeal must be filed within 3 days, would be heard by the commissioner or his designee. Goes on to say the NFL notified the NFLPA that it will in fact appeal Judge Robinson's disciplinary decision and filed its brief this afternoon. Commissioner Roger Goodell will determine who will hear the appeal. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Tim, what it means is that 6 games is on the move. Not sure where it ends up, but this was something that most of the national media expected. Locally, not so much, but most of the national media expected the NFL to appeal that 6-game suspension.
Yeah, and pretty much it's almost a guarantee that it's going up. I think, it's not a surprise that, the NFL is going to do this. I mean, it's clear that Roger Goodell is always concerned about image, and obviously the league has been hammered the last couple of days because Deshaun Watson's only gotten 6 games despite the findings from Judge Robinson about, Watson's actions and that she believes that he did do what he was accused of in those civil suits. So it's going to be interesting where it ends up. If it just goes up as simple as like maybe 2 more games to 8, and then it's a larger fine. But I kind of get the feeling that this has the potential to kind of spiral into a lawsuit, kind of what we saw with Tom Brady, with Zeke Elliott, depending on what the NFL decides to do here. And obviously they decided that the risk was worth it to try and make the suspension of the punishment towards Deshaun Watson bigger than what Judge Robinson gave. And I gotta imagine if this goes to court, this is going to get incredibly messy. I mean, maybe messy as Brady got, I'm not sure, but this is clearly not ending anytime soon. This might even be just the beginning.
Well, and so now the next step in this, and Tom Pelissero tweeted this out, but we kind of had gone over this a couple of times. The NFLPA now has 2 days to respond to the appeal, and Roger Goodell will determine who hears this appeal. It's entirely possible that they could try to come to some settlement that is more games, but it's at the discretion of Roger Goodell now, the length of this discipline. You knew he was pushing for a season with an indefinite suspension available to appeal back to the league for reinstatement after a year. That we heard was left kind of on the table, and it got more towards the 12-game range. So you may be right. You may come to some sort of settlement where the league says, you got to give us 2 games. You got to give us 4. Instead of 6, it's 8. It's 10, it's 12, and there's a fine imposed. I got to believe that the NFLPA, they've said that they're going to challenge this in federal court, which we've heard from several legal analysts that usually doesn't end well, just because the collectively bargained agreement gives Roger Goodell this right, and he's not stepping out of his rights, which is the only thing the federal courts would get involved with.
Right, and that's where, again, this gets messy. And I go back to Judge Robinson's opinion, and I think that's where, the NFLPA, I guess, can make some arguments that maybe this is just because that this was a process that both parties had agreed to, and the NFL just deciding that they're just going to go with their own right, which again, they have the right to, which then again, you have to call into the players, be like, well, why did you agree to this? Why did you say that, like, you're going to let this process happen, but then you're still letting Roger Goodell ultimately make the final decision? It seems like a misstep on the players as far as how they negotiate all this. But yeah, this is going to be pretty messy. It wouldn't be a shock if this goes to court, and it wouldn't be a shock, say, for example, there's an injunction and say Deshaun Watson plays week 1. And would have to imagine, as much as the NFL wants to suspend Deshaun Watson and get him a higher punishment, I would have thought that would have been the last thing they wanted, was because of all the negative publicity that Deshaun Watson has brought on the NFL, the Cleveland Browns, and himself for his actions, that the last thing anybody would want to see is him playing week 1 for the Browns against the Carolina Panthers. But it seems like that's the risk the NFL is willing to take, and however long this goes in court, whether initial ruling, appeal, however long this takes, it could be very messy. And again, we're talking, this comes off the heels of the whole argument of owners being held to a higher standard, as is also explicitly stated in the CBA. And we really have not seen much punishment in that way outside of what happened to Dolphins owner Stephen Ross yesterday. So this is getting towards gray area territory, and it's going to be like I said, this process is going to get cloudier, and it's just going to get longer.
Yeah, and the one thing is, that was one of the things that the league had to weigh as you're deciding, do you in fact appeal this? This is going to stay in the news cycle now until it is resolved, and it will overshadow some games without question, because now the Players Association, unless it is a 2-game, unless they up it to 8 games, maybe 10 games at most, you may get away with the NFLPA not appealing it. I think it goes any higher than 10 games, they appeal it, and they go to federal court, and then they drag it out. And the question that you have to ask if you're in the NFL, do you want this in federal court where all this, you're going to have all kinds of questions about the way you have treated owners brought out in federal court? That's where it's headed if it goes to federal court.
Yeah, and that's where I say it's going to get much messier, because then you could say, well, I know Deshaun Watson's obviously been accused of far more cases than, say, something that's happened to Jerry Jones or Daniel Snyder or whatever, but you can look at all those things and say, well, how did they get almost nothing? And Deshaun Watson gets 10 to 17 games and gets fined, say, $10 million, for example. And I mean, I know, again, that's what's negotiated in the CBA. That's what stood up in federal court. That's what has led to Tom Brady and Zeke Elliott's suspensions being reinstated after it went through, I think, U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in each of those suits, in each of those long cases. But it seems like, again, the NFL was willing to risk it because, they feel that, obviously, based on the findings, which are binding, that those can't be adjusted. Those, you have to stick to those in an appeal. And those are very negative towards Deshaun Watson, saying that he did some of the things he was accused of doing in those civil suits. So I guess my guess is they felt like that was enough in their minds, that's proof that they can go off and say that warrants a longer suspension than just 6 games, as well as no fine. So again, we've seen, contentiousness between the owners and the Players Association before. This is nothing new. It's just going to it's just going to be brought out in court once again. And I can tell you who wins, because of the language in the report from Judge Robinson and the prior settlement, the prior statements put out by those courts in those cases involving Brady and Elliott. This is going to be, I can't predict where this is going to go, but again, with this coming, it wouldn't be shocking if Deshaun Watson ends up playing anyway if this goes to court, because they just file an injunction and have him play right away, which again, the NFL seems like it's a risk they're willing to take.
Yeah, and again, the NFL had to weigh public perception versus the negotiated deal with the Players Association. They decided they were going to upset the Players Association as opposed to the public. Tim Bielik and I, cleveland.com, going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll turn our attention to training camp, but once again, developing story. The NFL does in fact appeal the 6-game suspension of Deshaun Watson. So it goes to a disciplinary hearing to probably up that from 6 games. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Once again, the NFL has, in fact, taken advantage of its right to appeal the 6-game suspension. So there will be a hearing by a designee that is appointed by Roger Goodell in the days ahead. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one before the NFL announced that it was going to, in fact, appeal that decision, and it's about the Deshaun Watson decision.
Davis, your boy from Vegas. I think I told you, if you remember, that at 4 being the minimum, 8 being the max. As it seems like to me, Deshaun Watson was a little more innocent of the bad things and a lot more guilty of the stupid things that a young black man would do, just as I said in your previous statements. So I hope NFL lets us go. We can move on. And seen by the Ross situation that happened today, I think the NFL is starting to wake up and realize that maybe we can move it past, because you have money, you have more opportunities, you have more leadway in life. We're going to hold you to the same standards, and that makes for a better world. Thank you, Dave. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Yeah, Tim, when you think about it, I find the Stephen Ross stuff kind of interesting. The whole 6-game suspension, that they issue that, you know, the day before they decide that they're going to appeal. I think they are going to be very much more cognizant of trying to be even-handed with the owners. But, you know, that was one of the things that Sue Robinson said in her findings. You can't change it all at once and then be more heavy-handed on the players initially. And that's, NFL can do what the NFL wants to do. It's their league, obviously.
Of course. And I mean, that's the thing where I don't know how, that's a tough argument to uphold in a court if you're saying, well, we suspended an owner, you know, for a day longer than Deshaun Watson was supposed to be suspended for a day. But then a court can say, well, that happened a day after the ruling. And this has been an investigation we've had for a year and a half. That doesn't seem like it adds up. And then you could still be like, well, why didn't you do this years ago? And you're just now, it goes back to Sue Robinson in her opinion, basically saying the NFL did not use fair notice as far as adjusting certain policies. And again, you can go back, she mentioned past precedents. You can go back again to all those different things we talked about with owners not getting punished for their own transgressions and those sort of things. Again, I'm not saying, you know, how we know how it's going to play out in court or whatever. I mean, you would just have to assume that that's the most likely outcome of all this is it goes into court, and this could take weeks to months to be resolved one way or the other. And I don't know how this ends. I mean, nobody does. Nobody knows how this is going to go. It's like I said, it's going to get much messier and much worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and it's going to stay in the news until it gets resolved. All right, so let's take a look. Browns did sign a wide receiver, Mary Kay Cabot from cleveland.com, as well as Plain Dealer. They've signed Dalen Baldwin, Michigan, Jackson State, and they've waived safety Nate Meters. And out on the field, we found out the new wide receiver, Baldwin, will wear number 17. There he is. Amari Cooper missed yesterday, back in pads and out on the practice field today as well. Deshaun Watson finds Michael Harley, an undrafted free agent who has played pretty well. Jacoby Brissett could be playing more than the first 6 games right now. Finds Harrison Bryant. A little bit of a misstep here as Tony Fields, a draft pick from a year ago, grabs the loose ball after it's deflected for the interception. Browns in pads, back out on the grass, out in Berea, and getting their work done. Tim, Baldwin is a guy that's, you're looking for depth. You had some of the young guys go down. If he flashes and shows something, he may end up being a practice squad guy. At this point, likely a guy to get out in camp and just see what he's got.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, considering, all the guys that are banged up at receiver, particularly Amari Cooper and David Bell, they're just looking for bodies at this point, because you got to get work in for second team, third team, all different quarterbacks, 7-on-7s. You got to have bodies to put out there. And quite simply, the Browns didn't have it because just of how banged up the position group has been, in the beginning of training camp. Almost forgot to mention Anthony Schwartzer as well. So that's 3 key receivers you're kind of banking on going into the season all banged up, not quite able to do much at the start of training camp. So again, at this part of camp in particular, as you're working guys in, you're getting them conditioned to game speed. You need to get guys out there just to get some reps, just so everyone else can get some work in.
One of the good things that's happened early in camp, Jack Conklin off of the physically unable to perform list. Still not certain to be ready week 1, but certainly trending that way. Conklin, final year of his contract, coming back from that injury. He's been exceptionally motivated because he'd like to stay a Brown.
I mean, I used to go out and train different places, but now I'm here. My kids are starting to get into the age where they're going to be in school, and Cleveland's where we want to make home. And having this facility and having Bill here and stuff, there's really no reason for me to go anywhere else.
When you say you make Cleveland your home, this is the last year of that deal, though. Have you thought about wanting to stay here beyond this?
I mean, obviously, I would love to stay here. This is the team. I love the team. I love the town. And, it really just comes down to me. It comes down to how I come back from this, and it's in my hands with what happens with that.
Yeah, he talks about dominating his rehab, and if he gets back to the player he is when he's healthy, I'm sure the Browns would love to have him around for a couple more years.
Of course, I mean, he's a Pro Bowl caliber right tackle. We saw how much this offensive line struggled when he wasn't in the game, obviously going down with that knee injury a year ago, caused him to miss so much of the season. And just, not just him, but just the entire tackle group was depleted by injuries a year ago. So the fact that he's, working out a little bit in camp is a good sign that he's getting there in his rehab, and they need him. The Browns need him to be healthy and to play to his level. They need Jedrick Wills to really step up and show that he was worth being a top 10 pick, but I think it's good for the Browns that it seems like Jack Conklin at least wants to stay. Whether that happens or not, like everything else in the NFL, it comes down to money and cap space and whether they can make it work. It might also come down in some ways to how he plays this season, how he comes back from the injury, and if he still plays at a very good level, maybe he sticks around long term. But, obviously with this offensive line, having to let go of J.C. Tretter, they got to make sure they have contingency plans for the offensive line and make sure they continue to have depth. But having good players, and find a way to keep them, it's a good problem to have.
So another guy that the Browns brought in for a workout is the USFL Defensive Player of the Year, edge rusher Chris Odom. He was in for a workout. It's scheduled to take place today. Odom is an interesting guy. Take a look at this. So he mentioned Defensive Player of the Year, 12.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. Not only forced that fumble, but also recovered it. He's number 93, as you see there, and played elite level, obviously, as the Defensive Player of the Year. Another guy that likes to get after the quarterback and can be disruptive. You see, and again, it's the USFL. I'm not trying to say he's an all-pro guy playing for the Gamblers there. You look at this guy, and Tim, he's intriguing. He's a big guy who looks like he's got a quick first step, who gets after the quarterback and creates some chaos. Can never have enough of those guys on the defensive side of the football, particularly on the line. It'll be interesting to see if he's a guy that earns more of a look than just the workout.
100%. I mean, we know what the Browns have on the defensive line right now with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. There's depth questions outside of Chase Winovich. You have Alex Wright, who's your third-round pick, who I think is still kind of raw and really will take a little more time, I think, to show what he's capable of as he kind of grows into his body and learns more of the technical things that come with playing defensive end at the NFL. But, there's nothing wrong with giving these guys a shot. I mean, that's what training camp's all about. You have 90 guys on the roster. You got a lot of work you got to get through with a lot of guys. And getting these guys in pro camp, getting them film against NFL caliber players trying to make their way into the NFL, it's never a bad thing. And I mean, we've seen a couple guys, even from the XFL in 2020, try to get their shot in the NFL. And, that's what these leagues are for. They're for guys trying to get some pro reps and maybe get a second chance at the NFL. Maybe they didn't get otherwise, and see if they can earn a roster spot. We'll see if that's the case with Chris Odom.
Another guy that is intriguing, defensive side of the football, Jacob Phillips, has been banged up, hasn't been able to show the true player that he showed he was in LSU that had the Browns take him in the third round. So Jacob Phillips talking about his health and just how important this season is for him.
I feel like just personally, I feel like I should, get a little bit stronger, get a little bit heavier. That way, when we play our divisional games and, when you make that first collision, that go down right then instead of, going on getting those, 1 or 2 yards more. So that was something that I worked on. I got with the trainers. I stayed here after the season for about like a month and a half, and just tried to, add as much muscle and smart muscle onto my body that I could.
How big a year is this for you personally?
This is a very big year for me. Obviously coming in my rookie year, dealing with injuries, missing games last year, tearing my bicep, missing games. This year is really just, I'm just really trying to gear myself up to, have a healthy season. And, I know when I'm healthy, I'm on the field, that, everything's going to fall into place. And, I'm going to be able to, show everybody in Cleveland, the player I am.
And Tim, like a lot of the young guys, he can go out there and carve out a role in this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when he's been able to play, he's shown some flashes, I think, in these first two seasons. But as we know, the most important ability when it comes to any sport is availability. And if you're not healthy enough to play, then you're not really contributing. So the pressure is going to be on Jacob Phillips, number one, to be healthy, to stay healthy, to avoid injuries. I know that's easier said than done. Football is a full-speed collision sport. Injuries are part of the game. They're just going to happen. But somehow Jacob Phillips kind of has to find a way to avoid that if he really wants to, establish himself and remain part of this team and really kind of try to crack the lineup. We know the Browns seem like they hit a home run with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at one linebacker spot. Phillips seems destined to be kind of that middle linebacker type if he's healthy. The Browns have Anthony Walker back, of course, this season. But I think the door's open for Phillips. He just needs to continue to be out there and show what he's got. And I think if he could do those things, he's got a shot to get some reps and show what he can show, what made him a third-round pick.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from one of Jacoby Brissett's former head coaches in the NFL, what he thinks the Browns have in Jacoby Brissett. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE, and again, a developing story. The NFL has, in fact, appealed the 6-game Deshaun Watson suspension. The NFLPA now has 2 days to respond to it. Adam Schefter tweets this out. Personal conduct policy states the appeal will be processed on an expedited basis. The commissioner or his designee may overturn, reduce, modify, or increase the discipline previously issued, and it will be final and binding on all parties. And Tim, when you say final and binding on all parties, that is relative to taking it to federal court, which the Players Association has already said they plan on doing if the NFL increased the discipline.
Yeah, and like I said before, this is the beginning of an incredibly long, drawn-out process. I mean, we're talking, initial ruling. We're talking about potentially filing it to a higher court, an appeals court, for maybe a second set of trials, kind of what we saw with Tom Brady. And then again, I mean, I've talked about the possibility maybe there's an injunction that lets Deshaun Watson play right away, which I think is probably even worse for the NFL considering all that's going on. Like I said, all the negative publicity brought on by Deshaun Watson. That would be that'd be a very bad look, I think, for the NFL and maybe everybody involved. That if Deshaun Watson plays Week 1, I think, because I mean, that's a message. That's a weird thing too, because people will say, he missed all 2021. That was an agreement between the Texans and Deshaun Watson that he wasn't going to play. That wasn't a suspension. That was a voluntary leave of absence he took from the team. So he technically has not been suspended any games. So if he plays any of these games before a ruling comes out that he's actually suspended, then this becomes a real mess. And it's already been a mess. Like I said, this could get very messy, and who knows how long this could take. This might even take more than the entire season. We don't know where this kind of ends up.
Yeah, without question. Well, it's clear that Jacoby Brissett is going to play 6 games, maybe more, as Brown's starting quarterback. A guy that knows him really well is Chuck Pagano. Now, Pagano coached Brissett with the Colts. Talks about the guy that will be QB1 for the Browns with Watson out.
So Jacoby, we had him in 2017. Jacoby's been there since March. So he's gone through the entire offseason program. Baker, like you said, they kicked him out of the building. He's now in Carolina. So Jacoby got the lion's share, if not all the reps in OTA. So it's not going to be an issue like when he came to Indy in 2017, September 2nd, I think we traded for him. He didn't know the playbook. He didn't even know the guys in the huddle, let alone get in the huddle, call a play, go to the line of scrimmage, change the protection, ID the mic, all that's the snap count. So he had nothing. So he's got the entire offseason. So he knows the playbook. He knows the personnel. He's got chemistry, with the players. Jacoby's a stud. I mean, he is an absolute stud. He started 37 games in the National Football League. He's got all the metrics that you need to be an NFL quarterback. He's big. He's strong. He's talented. Like, he can make all the NFL throws. And he's smart.
And again, Tim, that's Chuck Pagano, who was the head coach of the Colts. It's important to kind of put that in context. You look at a guy's record as a starter, and Brissett's isn't great. He filled in for Tom Brady, Deflategate. Coming in for Tom Brady, if you're a quarterback, not many people have Tom Brady's skill set as an offense is designed. The thing I didn't realize that he came in so late with the Colts. That will explain to you why his record as a starting quarterback is what it is. There's a familiarity that any quarterback has with the offense and with his teammates, makes him better.
Yeah, and I mean, don't forget also he played in 2019 for the Colts. He started most of his games and was close to 500 with a team that was far better than the team he played with 2 years prior. I mean, again, they were flirting with 500. It wasn't until Philip Rivers got there that they were good enough to make the playoffs the next season. And Brissett's not a risk taker of a quarterback. I think we know that right now. He's not going to be a guy that throws 300 yards, 4 touchdown passes every single week or every other week. That's not his game. His game is just manage things, control the football, long drives, maybe occasionally you break a big play, but his game is not turning the football over. And the hope is that there's enough talent on this football team with Jacoby Brissett playing, probably likely now more than 6 games, that they can kind of elevate him and make his job easier, and especially in Kevin Stefanski's offense, which we know is pretty quarterback friendly.
And again, game manager has this negative connotation. When you say that, you don't want him to put the team in a bad spot. That's what and taking care of the football is key one. Don't turn the football over. This is from Dawg Poundale. It's kind of interesting. Jacoby Brissett's 3 biggest strengths that will keep the Browns in contention. Number 3, big athletic, 6'4", 240. He is definitely a big and athletic guy. Number 2, game-winning experience, and he does have that. Now, the record is what it is. And number 3 that you alluded to, won't turn the ball over, and that is key when you've got Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and a pretty good defense. 36 touchdowns, 17 interceptions in his career. The recipe for winning with Jacoby Brissett will be different than it will be with Deshaun Watson, but there is a recipe for success.
Yeah, and I think it comes down again to, not turning the football over, making sure you're scoring, whenever you get good drives, finishing them with touchdowns, and that's going to rely on the running game to make sure that gets done. And the defense trying to get some takeaways, give Jacoby Brissett and the offense short fields to work with. Those are going to be, I think, the keys for success. And as we know, the Browns, when they get ahead, are going to just lean on that offensive line. They're going to lean on that run game, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And they also mentioned Jacoby's size, and that's the important thing as well, is he's a mobile enough quarterback, which is why they signed him. He's got some similar strengths in terms of physical attributes to Deshaun Watson. He's not the runner that Deshaun Watson is, but he's capable enough where he can run for first downs if needed. I don't think he's ever going to be, a guy who runs for 100 yards, but just enough to move the chains. The old saying is you don't go broke taking a profit, and it seems like that's Jacoby Brissett's game, is just take the profit, just keep moving the chains. You're not always going to get that kind of success every single drive, but just the fact that he's not going to turn over means you're not going to have those back-breaking turnovers that we saw from Baker Mayfield, multiple times throughout the last 4 seasons.
The other thing that's going to be important is the offensive line. Jack Conklin talked about the offensive line and what he, a Pro Bowl type right tackle, has seen from the offensive line coach Bill Callahan.
It's been awesome to have Bill. Being able to come here and have him as a teacher has just made my game taken to the next level. I think he's been around the game for so long. He's such a craftsman in how he breaks everything down, and there's literally, I can say every day there's something new that I pick up from him, and I just think the cohesion he also brings to the room. Sometimes he's kind of a wizard with that. He gets us angry at him, and I think sometimes it's on purpose to bring us all together. And it's kind of it's just everything. He's always thinking, and it's great to have him, and I'm happy. I would say he's more of a technician than any coach I've had. He definitely has broken down more techniques and stuff than any coach offensive line coach I've ever had.
And Tim, when you have a guy that has the pedigree of Jack Conklin talking about that's why Bill Callahan's regarded as one of the top offensive line coaches in the NFL.
No question about it. And you've seen the difference he's made since he's come to the Browns the last couple seasons. When healthy, this offensive line has been one of the best units in the NFL, if not the best. And obviously the scheme plays a big role in it, because the zone blocking team is where you usually see some good offensive line play. Not to mention, just the quality they've gotten out of the interior for so long with Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller the past few seasons. Now you're sliding Nick Harris into that center position for J.C. Treader. They hope he can play close to that level, if not better than that level. And again, this offensive line play, I think, is going to come down to the tackles, how well they play, hoping they're healthy and hoping that Jedrick Wills continues to develop and show what he's capable of. But, it's clear the Bill Callahan influence on that unit. And for those young offensive linemen that they have with guys like Jedrick Wills and James Hudson, who they drafted last year, probably played way more than he was supposed to. Few better tutors of offensive linemen in the NFL than Bill Callahan.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, some bold predictions for the Browns from Pro Football Focus. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE, and we continue to monitor a developing story. The NFL will, in fact, appeal the 6-game suspension of Deshaun Watson. NFLPA now has 2 days to respond. This is from Aaron Wilson, national reporter. NFL is expected to pursue a significant increase in the punishment of Deshaun Watson. Some league sources predicting they will seek to suspend him for the entire season, per league sources. And let's, Tim, when you look at that, we had heard reports they came off of that initially the entire season. They were looking more in the 12-game range. They may be trying to get the NFLPA and Deshaun Watson to agree to a lesser suspension, or they may just decide we're putting the hammer down and it's going to be an entire season, as Roger Goodell has the collectively bargained power to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's clear that's what the league has wanted, I think, for some time, is a significant punishment, a message-sending punishment of Deshaun Watson in this case. And obviously the appeal comes because they felt 6 games wasn't enough. They felt, maybe that past precedent shouldn't be a precursor to what kind of punishment Deshaun Watson gets in this case because of the sheer volume of civil suits that were filed against him, because of the allegations that were against him, even though 2 grand juries opted not to pursue criminal charges against Deshaun Watson. And again, I mean, my guess, because of the optics, that they're not going to, maybe they don't look for a situation where they're trying to toe a line of, okay, we want to add the punishment, but we're only at a couple games and a fine, just whatever the minimum is to avoid court. It seems like it's kind of a message sender that they want to drop the hammer, like you said, and they'll let it play out as however it does. But again, they're playing the game. They're playing the risk that this goes to court. Because, I mean, again, this goes up significantly. I don't see how this doesn't end in federal court.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially if they go for an entire year. It's ending up in federal court, and we'll see. Nobody knows how that ends up based on the arguments of the Players Association. All right, before we let you go, Pro Football Focus, bold predictions for each and every NFL team. And they got 3 of them with the Browns. Number 1, Myles Garrett will win Defensive Player of the Year. You see the comparisons to TJ Watt in that with the Steelers. Cade York will have the best graded kick percentage in the league. He'll be the best graded kicker. And they, again, are comparing him to Justin Tucker. And this one's kind of interesting. Cleveland's offensive line will rank outside of the top 10 in the NFL. It'll be interesting to see the Myles Garrett one. I could certainly see. I think the only thing that has kept Myles Garrett from being a legitimate, serious contender to being Defensive Player of the Year has been his health. And, he had the suspension last year. He's playing on one leg the last 3 or 4 games. He stays healthy for 17 games. I think he puts up the numbers that put him right there.
Yeah, and I mean, each of the last 3 years, he's been in that discussion. And like you said, he was suspended in 2019, contracted COVID in 2020, had the injury issue last year that, caused him really to slow down from the pace that he was at the beginning of the season. So I think of those 3, that's probably far and away the most likely one. It's certainly possible that the Browns' offensive line finishes outside the top 10. And really, there's several ways that can happen. Say, Jedrick Wills doesn't progress as expected. He doesn't live up to the hype, or if there's injuries across the offensive line. I mean, depth on the offensive line, you only have so much of it because there's only so many really good offensive linemen. The one I don't see happening is Cade York being the highest graded kicker in the NFL, and that's because Justin Tucker's still a thing. I've said before, he's in field goal range as soon as Baltimore hits the 50-yard line. And based on that alone, I mean, I don't know how you could be a higher graded kicker than that. But certainly from what we've seen from Cade York in practice, he can hit those kicks with regularity. He can hit some long kicks. I don't know if he'll ever be good as Justin Tucker, but if he can be close to that or close to what Evan McPherson did as a rookie, the Browns might have a pretty good kicker on their hands.
Yeah, and the one thing that's it's good to see that 50-plus yard, and that's what makes Tucker so dangerous. Cade York is starting to get a little bit of that vibe. We'll see. The other thing is, has to do it in games. He's doing it all training camp long. You certainly feel good about it because he's done it in college where he had a huge percentage of 50-yard field goals made. If he can do that, Browns will be thrilled with the pick they spent on him.
No question about it. I think when it comes to kicking, you're only as good as the next kick you attempt. Because kickers, we know, have a short shelf life. There's no margin for error. Either you make it or you don't. It's the ultimate pass-fail position. So Cade York's got to go make his kicks, especially in first energies, which we know has been a notorious place for Browns kickers not named Phil Dawson. So he's going to have to learn those dynamics of that stadium because he's going to be kicking in that stadium for half or more than half of his games, depending on the schedule every year.
Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. As always, Tim, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik. Again, developing story. The NFL has, in fact, appealed the Deshaun Watson suspension of 6 games. NFLPA has 2 days to respond to it. It's been reported that the NFL is now going to again seek that full-year suspension. Expect the NFLPA to tell you we're going to federal court. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, it's Jacob Roach from Dog Pound Daily, Sports4CLE, talking Browns. When we return, stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE, and one of the really good signs early in training camp, Jack Conklin activated off the physically unable to perform list. Conklin met with the media today talking about his health and kind of ramping back up into football shape.
Good. It's coming along real well. It's just getting started back practicing, so I just got to ease in and just let my knee get back to feeling used to the football. But everything's going great. I feel stronger than I've been in a long time, just from putting in all those hours, and I feel good.
How grueling was the return? Because you went through that. You had to miss 3 weeks after dislocating your elbow. You come right back, and then you get hurt right away. And I'm sure that had to be heartbreaking. So just how tough was that to come back?
Yeah. I mean, it sucks. Finally get back. Think I'm going to be ready to go, and then sit down and have the patella pop open. So not fun, but it's part of the game we play. This stuff happens, and it's I think really what defines you is what you do when something happens like this. Do you let it end your career, or do you come back and work your ass off and turn it into a positive and growing experience?
Jack Conklin talking about the rehab. Let's welcome in Jacob Roach from Dog Pound Daily. Jacob, he mentioned about dominating the rehab, and that's by all accounts what he did. How important is the activation of Conklin, and how important is he for the Browns in 2022? I know you've written an article about this. Take us through that.
With Conklin, we've heard all along, like, there was a chance that they thought he would be on track to play in week 1. And I just wasn't sure where that was going to be, but you activate him with only a week on the PUP, and it makes this really realistic that he could be here for week 1. And I think sometimes people forget just how good Jack Conklin was in 2020. I mean, when he was healthy, I know last year he only plays in 7 games, but I still had an 86 run blocking grade from PFF last year in those 7 games. And he was dealing with injuries at that time as well. He's just the perfect prototypical tackle in Kevin Stefanski's zone blocking scheme, especially in the run game. He fits everything that you want to do that he wants to do from his tackles that Kevin Stefanski needs. And it also has this domino effect where Chris Hubbard is now back to the first tackle off the bench. You don't have to worry about Hudson playing right away if Hudson's not ready. When both of those guys go down last year, it just really put them in a tough spot, not just missing Conklin, but just where the depth goes overall. So you're going to get an all-pro player back, and then it sets up to where people are worried about the depth. Well, this sets it up to where the depth is pretty strong at tackle. Yeah, I agreed wholeheartedly. And keep in mind, Jedrick Wills was basically playing on one ankle for a lot of that time as well. Let's talk a little bit about guys who have been early camp standouts who have really caught your eye. And again, I know you've kind of written and answered questions about this on Dog Pound Daily. Let's start with the kicker, Cade York. I mean, it sounds like the guy is as accurate as you would want at this point. We talked to Cameron Justice last night on our podcast, and we kind of asked, we were like, we've kind of heard, because I was at camp on Saturday, and but even on the practices that fans haven't been out there, I was like, we've heard he hasn't missed. And she's like, no, like, he's not missed. He's not missed at this point in camp. And I get it. There's no weather. There's no any of that stuff. But when's the last time we got this far into training camp and a kicker hadn't missed? Like that, I no joke, on Saturday, while I was at training camp, the team was practicing running 7-on-7 drills on the other side of the field, and I just watched Cade York kick for 25 minutes. It was just, I swear he kicked a kick from 50 yards that would have been good from 65. And it's just, I've never seen that in Cleveland. It's just, I know he's still got to do it, in the games, and we got to worry about all those things, but it's incredibly encouraging to see a guy that you're just really not that stressed about, at least not yet. Now you know what the Ravens and the Bengals feel like based on who they have kicking the football for them, too. Another couple of guys, wide receivers, Michael Woods, Jakeem Grant. There's going to be some opportunities for them based on David Bell being banged up, Anthony Schwartz being banged up, even Amari Cooper kind of being hobbled a little bit. I think Jakeem Grant, for me, I mean, Michael Woods especially has been surprising, but Jakeem Grant, for me, I always just kind of looked at him as that special teamer, as that returner, and you're seeing him get some significant snaps in the slot, which leads to the David Bell injury that you just mentioned. And it's like, who's going to be in that slot? Because none of these wide receivers outside of UDFA Mike Harley are true slot wide receivers, and, that have – experience in the NFL, and Grant has just been making plays. They're running go routes with him, some reverses, kind of some of that stuff you've seen they tried to do with JoJo Natson in Stefanski's first year. They're kind of emulating that with Grant, and Grant's just showing incredible speed and athleticism, and he's got that open field quickness that you need from a guy that can take a 5-yard pass to the house. And he's a little bit of a smaller wide receiver, but like, as we've seen in the NFL, in the recent years, if you can catch, get open, catch, take the ball downfield, I'm not concerned about height. I mean, he's just got the speed to make up for it. And he's really shown that maybe he's going to be more than a returner here, which is not what I thought. And with rookie Mike Woods, I won't lie, when they drafted him, I was like, nah, I don't buy this. I don't like this pick. And when you're there in camp and you talk to people that have been there, you can't stop watching Mike Woods make plays. He's a 4.55. He's not going to straight up burn you. But just like with David Bell, he gets open, he catches the football, and he's got a little shiftiness after the catch. And I really think that early on, he's shown me more already than I expected he could do.
Yeah, he's a guy that could very well carve out a spot on the 53-man roster. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. What do you expect from them? And again, I know you've written this, you've answered this question from some of the viewers on Dog Pound Daily. What do you expect from this defense?
This defense, as long as it's healthy, that's always, kind of that caveat that you got to kind of throw out there. But this defense at every level has playmakers. I know defensive tackle, maybe it's a little bit questionable, but you've got as good of an edge rush pair as I think that you've ever seen in Cleveland, at least. And these defensive backs, these safeties and these corners and even these linebackers, there is so much speed on this team that it's ridiculous. I do not see a situation where this defense, for any reason, should finish outside the top 10. It's just there's speed and athleticism at all levels. They need some young guys to kind of make some steps. We need Delpit to take a step forward this year. We need Jacob Phillips to kind of stay healthy, and JOK and Newsome to kind of continue their strong rookie years. But there's just speed, athleticism, talent, the IQ. And now all of them, with the exception of the rookies, are in the second or third year in Joe Woods' scheme. We haven't seen that in Cleveland. We haven't seen comfortability in a unit, one side or the other, where players have been in the same scheme and played with the same players for multiple years. And John Johnson has already pointed it out. They're comfortable. They don't need to communicate anymore. They're not talking. They know what each other are going to do, and that can't be understated how important that is.
You mentioned Phillips. So he was asked today, who's faster, Jacob Phillips or JOK? Here's Jacob Phillips' answer on that.
I say I win. He say he win. But that's just good. I think our speed go hand in hand with each other. Especially when we're on the field together, and I think that's what what coach likes, that when you got two people that can fly around, get to the perimeter fast, is gonna make for a tough defense to get past.
Jacob, he had a line about he wanted his linebackers to be like afraid that they hunt. Has he said that to you guys before?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what Coach Wood, that's what he thought upon. Fast, physical, together. So first thing on the list is fast. So he wants all of us to be fast, and then when we arrive at the ball, be physical and arrive all together at the same time.
Do you feel that job in the middle is yours to lose?
I think the job in the middle is something that, being a Mike linebacker is something that, I've always done throughout my whole life, and it's the one job in the world that, I would rather be doing than anything else. Everything that comes with it, it's a lot, it's more than meets the eye, but, it's something that, I'm prepared for, and, I've trained, and, I'm ready for the moment if it's given.
And Jacob, he answered that like a wily veteran. Didn't say that he thought the job was his, said it's his dream job. I know you've written about this. Pairing him and JOK, what are your thoughts on that?
It's just, I look back, especially if you want to look at what I think prime Jacob Phillips is and what he can be in the NFL. If you go back to 2020 and you watch him against the Steelers in what would be the final game of the year in which the Browns clinched that playoff berth, you saw a guy that, kind of put some tape that reminds you of some of Jacob or JOK's tape from last year. A guy that just saw and diagnosed the play and exploded to the football. These are two guys that can cover ground faster than humans should be able to cover ground when they are that size. Like, we saw the plays, right? Like last year with JOK chasing down Lamar Jackson in covering this ground. That's what Jacob Phillips can do that too. I will say, I think JOK is a little faster, if you're just asking my opinion, and not that it means anything, but I think he is probably the slightly faster one. But if you got two of those linebackers that are just zipping from sideline to sideline, and Jacob Phillips is a tackling machine in college, the only thing I'm worried about is his health, just because it hasn't been there yet. But to me, their skill set aligns perfectly with the modern NFL and stopping these running quarterbacks and these pass-happy teams. And it could be a nightmare duo for offenses if they stay healthy together.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree particularly that those two are the new age linebackers. You better be able to run all over the field because the offense is going to throw the ball. Jacob Roach and I are going to step aside, take one quick time out, other side of the break. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, and what are going to be some tough decisions come the end of training camp. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jacob Roach from Dawg Pound Daily. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Deshaun Watson suspension.
Yes, hi. I love the show. Just wanted to say my opinion. I think that if the NFL tries to appeal this 6-game suspension of Deshaun Watson, I think that would be totally ridiculous. They have an arbitrator, former judge, had all the information possible, made a decision. They should just stick to it. I think it's as simple as that. Okay, have a great day. Go Browns.
Appreciate all of the voicemails. Jacob, I tend to agree, and I know it might be a little bit of a Cleveland bias, and I realize that Roger Goodell is looking at a lot of different things. You either collectively bargain something and live with the first that will set a precedent, or you don't bother collectively bargaining it. That's kind of the way where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I've kind of where I line up to a little bit, just because I wonder if you go against this is the first one, how's that going to affect next CBA's negotiations? I mean, are you worried that, the NFLPA is going to be angry? Because they probably are, because you're going against what was Roger Goodell in the league kind of conceding a little bit of power and bringing out in an independent person to try to make these decisions. I could see where they appeal it and just add a fine, like that. Maybe that is something that ends up happening. But there's just so many factors, because maybe the PA sues if they appeal. And I think that if the NFL wants this to just get behind them, and that doesn't mean that is the right way to go, but the league probably wants this to be behind them because the Hall of Fame game is tomorrow, then they won't appeal it. I could see them trying to just try to brush it away, and the only way to brush it away and end it is not to appeal. So I tend to lean not appeal, but it's the NFL. It wouldn't shock me if they do either.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And if they do appeal it and add games, you can be sure it's going to go to court and it's going to get dragged out. All right, let's move on. Again, this from some of the questions that you've gotten on Dawg Pound Daily. What do you think could be the toughest training camp cuts? Some of the guys that are kind of on that bubble that are going to have to find their way winning a spot on that 53-man roster.
It comes in the running back room / wide receiver room, because the first one for me is Demetric Felton, who has taken advantage of some of the snaps that he's gotten in the slot without David Bell there. And I know that when I was at camp that he was over with the wide receivers, not the running backs. So maybe he does shift into that wide receiver room. But the back end of that wide receiver room with him, and it was Isaiah Weston before he goes to IR, but like him and Mike Harley and Mike Woods and just like a lot of these really young, talented guys that, have these upside. I think Felton to me is easily the hardest. And then you're kind of leaning towards corner because do you have too many corners? It's one of those situations where this team's got a lot of really good players, and you start looking at corner and wide receiver where there's a lot of guys and not that many spots because they're probably going to keep all 4 running backs. So Felton can't find his way in there. He may be the one that just ends up being the odd man out. And then really, I think the toughest one is Johnny Stanton, because I think Johnny Stanton brings so many great, qualities. He's been playing a lot of tight end here as well, but it just goes to the end where they're probably not going to keep a fullback as versatile as Stanton can be. This offense is evolving, and both Felton and Stanton are guys that I think will be picked up probably immediately, but the way it shakes out, I'm not sure where they fall in.
All right, before we let you go, again, this is an article that you wrote. 3 undrafted rookies who could shine during training camp. So number 3, we got a defensive tackle, Glenn Logan from LSU. Number 2, we've talked about him a little bit, Mike Hartley, an undrafted rookie free agent from Miami, the Hurricanes. And number 1, another guy we've talked a little bit about, Sean Jolly, cornerback, Appalachian State. Take us through those and what you see from them and what you think might be the end result relative to the roster for each of them.
Glenn Logan, to me, stands out, him and Mike Hartley especially, as very unique positions at training camp. It was kind of funny because when I walked into training camp, the first player I saw on Saturday was Glenn Logan, which just kind of felt ironic. But Glenn Logan, he's the only one that is a run-stuffing defensive tackle on this roster. I mean, other guys can make plays. I think Togiai can be an impactful, early down run player, but he's the only true big-bodied, run-stuffing, immovable objects type player who actually started his career as a 3-4 defensive end when he got to LSU, and he put on some size and slid in when they switched to the 4-3. So I just think he has a unique skill set that's not really on the roster anywhere else, including other undrafted rookies. So he just kind of brings something that no one else does. But do you value that enough to keep him is the ultimate question. And then Mike Hartley, he's the only true slot receiver. Just like we're looking with Glenn Logan, he's a slot receiver who he produced at Miami, Florida with no quarterback. I mean, he was not in a situation with very consistent quarterback play. He's not going to roast you down the sideline, but he's going to do a lot of things that you loved that Jarvis Landry did. He's just going to be consistent. He's going to be where he needs to be. And if it's, 3rd and 6, he's going to get 7. He can get a little vertical, but in the end, he's just a reliable receiver that you can lean on, under pressure in some situations like that. He'll always be where he needs to be. And then you switch over to Sean Jolly, just like these other 2. He has the interesting thing of being the only slot corner on the roster. All 3 of these guys kind of brought in to have a very defined role that they're kind of trying to figure out if they take a traditional player in that spot or if they kind of convert some guys like Greg Newsome into the slot. Sean Jolly was graded as the number 1 slot corner in the country a couple of years ago at Appalachian State. So, he goes to a much smaller school, but he has that very defined role that the Browns don't have, and he's pretty good at it. He's a smaller corner, but he's got great speed to keep up with those slot wide receivers. And in terms of being like a depth piece at slot corner, if, maybe somebody on the outside goes down and Greg Newsome needs to go back to the outside, or even if Greg Newsome misses time, he's a really good candidate to kind of be a depth piece there at the end of that corner room.
Jacob Roach, Dawg Pound-Daly, great stuff as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jacob.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
All right, Jacob Roach. Make sure you read him. Dawg Pound-Daly. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.